What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have yet another collection update for you. And this rounds out all the Florida stuff, finally, which, it's taken some time because, again, I bought a lot of stuff. So, yeah, this one's kind of all over the place. Definitely, of course, some metal because, duh. But there's also kind of like a mini deep dive in here, at least in terms of one band that I picked out 5 releases from. It's almost the band's entire discography, minus one album that I was missing that I did find when I got back up here. But it's a fun one that's kind of off the metal spectrum a bit. But yeah, let's just get down to this because I can finally move on to the Denver stuff after this. So here we go. Scarve Luminiferous. This is the second album from this French death metal slash industrial metal act. I have one of this band's albums. I can't remember the name of it, but I thought it was pretty decent. I figured why not check out another one of the releases. This band at one point featured one Dirk Verburen on drums, formerly of Soulwork, currently in Megadeth, and actually featured 2 vocalists from 2 very different bands. One, Guillaume Bidot, he was the vocalist for Nemec for a while and sadly passed last year. And Pierrick Valence, who is the frontman for Phasm, which is a really interesting death metal slash death and roll group from France. And this is very noisy, very atmospheric, but I don't know, kind of interesting. Like, it kind of lurks in that same sort of category you would put, I would say, a band like Fear Factory or Strapping Young Lad, especially around the Alien era of Strapping Young Lad, because there is a lot going on at all times on here. You have a ton of syncopated, heavy, kind of like Meshuggah slash Fear Factory style riffs. The guitars are very crunchy, kind of have like a big bottom-heavy down-tune sound. And again, there's this constant atmospheric drone in the background, like industrial synths, where they're not necessarily playing like a giant melody, but rather a huge soundscape in the background to add to its very industrial atmosphere. It can be a bit much at times, especially considering you have 2 vocalists on here, which alternate between clean and harsh vocals and kind of flip often. Sometimes kind of out of nowhere where you feel like you're settling down into like a more harsh part or a more clean part, they will flip and you're like, okay, well, didn't need to happen so soon. And that kind of works with the production here, which is very dense. Like, it is just thick with atmosphere, heavy, chunky guitars. Again, the vocals, I mean, it's pretty bassy too. The drums are very busy. I mean, Dirk's, you know, kind of a blast beat machine, but he's also just a hell of a drummer in general. And there's lots of dissonant melodies on here, especially on songs like Alteration, Capsized, and Futile Resilient. Futile Resilient has a really cool lead-in with like very cool like dissonant, you know, guitars and such. Very melodic. And Capsized, I think, is a big standout here because it is just a monstrously heavy song with some really crushing riffs. And they actually stand out a little bit more just because like the atmosphere kind of like, you know, takes a little bit of a break, which often on here, I think it could have taken a lot of breaks. It just gets to be too much at certain points, and again, just kind of adds to this just kind of claustrophobic feeling of the album. And it's not that claustrophobic feeling that adds to the whole vibe of the album, it just gets to be a bit much. Honestly, the only real break from that was the Entombed cover, Serpent Speech, which they do an awesome job, and they wisely kind of take out the industrial atmosphere and all the synths in the background just to make it sound decidedly more raw, kind of like how Entombed should be. Overall, this was a pretty decent album. Again, it just kind of gets to be a bit much with all the stuff coming at you at different points. Again, kind of similar to Strapping Young Lad's Alien, which can be a lot to fucking take on, but I do love that album. This one, though, is okay. Recommend it, again, if you're a big fan of Strapping Young Lad and Fear Factory and a bit of Meshuggah, you might really dig this, so check it out. Sourvein, Black Fangs. This is the 3rd album from this US sludge slash doom metal act. I believe throughout the course of this band's existence, all of the band members have been from multiple states. You have New York, North Carolina, Washington, Texas. But I think the main member, and I would say where their sound lurks, is definitely Louisiana, because this is very much in the vein of the whole NOLA scene of sludge metal. I mean, look at this album cover. It practically looks like an I Hate God album cover. This band even features current and former members of Weed Eater and Buzz Oven, so there's like a little bit of that sludge pedigree to it. And yeah, this is just mind-numbingly heavy sludge metal. It is dark, foreboding, slow. The guitar tone and bass tone on here is incredibly heavy. Like, this has that gloriously heavy sludge tone that you would associate with, again, I Hate God, Acid Bath, Crowbar, and it's even complemented well by the very kind of I Hate God style snarled vocals on here. Most of this is very slow and plodding, lots of single droning riffs, big chugs, heavy breakdowns. There's a little bit of like D-beat hardcore in here too. The songs Gasp and Nomadic are like particularly a little bit more hardcore infused. The breakdown that shows up on Gasp is easily one of the heaviest moments on this album that is pretty much chock full of heavy moments. In fact, like only heavy moments. Even when it decides to get a little bit more atmospheric, it's again very heavy just in the vibe. Like Holy Transfusion with the chants and the weird kind of droning atmosphere in the background. It's a flat out like unsettling song. The whole vibe of this album is just dark and foreboding, even when they decide to squeeze in some more like southern rock sort of riffs on Bleeding Charm. It only does like that much to lift the mood on here, which the mood is, again, just bleak as hell. I mean, you know, all the bands I've compared this to, yeah, they're not known for being bright and cheery. The only knock I can make on this is maybe it is a little oversimplified at times. Like a lot of the grooves are very straightforward. The riffs are simple, and chuggy, and kind of plodding, but it just works with the whole vibe. Like with sludge metal, I don't expect a lot of like, you know, technical or elaborate play. I pretty much just expect the most heavy riffs known to man, and this band delivers on that. I picked up an EP by these guys years ago, and I've been meaning to check out more by them. Super glad I picked this up. Again, it kind of just falls in the vein of a lot of sludge metal out there, but it is really well executed, and again, it is just mind-numbingly heavy. So yeah, if you like Crowbar, Acid Bath, definitely some Buzz Oven in here too. Check this out. It's just flat out disgusting. All right, we have a pair here from Slough Feg, or the Lord Weird Slough Feg, depending on when you catch them. We have their 7th album, Ape Uprising, and we have their 3rd album, Down Among the Deadmen. Now, this is a San Fran-based heavy metal act that kind of thrives on just weird, catchy melodies and, I don't know, just like a very classic sort of sound in terms of heavy metal, but also like some classic rock influence. This band is just flat out strange. I mean, they are called the Lord Weird, and they earn it. Now, I found out about this band because I'm a big fan of Hammers of Misfortune, and the main gentleman behind this band, Mike Scalzi, is a frequent member of that band, off and on. I believe he popped up on the most recent one, but he was kind of off and on with the band for a while. This is his main project, and it is, again, just sort of fun, very riffy, lots of classic heavy metal harmonies and leads, lots of galloping drums, but there's just a sort of strange sort of avant-garde attitude towards it, like not necessarily musically, but in terms of like the subject matter and some interesting transitions here and there. Now, Ape Uprising, I would say, is probably the most straightforward of the two. Like, this is just straight up riffs, galloping drums, big hooks. The title track on here is kind of the lone, longer, more lavish song, and it is just flat out riff city. Again, kind of harking between bands like Iron Maiden and Thin Lizzy. It's just absolutely infectious harmonies and guitar work all over this album. Mike's vocals are very tuneful but very gravelly. I just like the gruffness to his voice overall. And there's a lot of like interesting folky twists on here. Like all of a sudden we'll kind of go into a jaunty sort of like folk gallop or folk groove, and the guitar harmonies kind of find that sweet spot between classic heavy metal and just, again, like a folk metal or folk rock sort of sound. I love all the heavy metal flourishes, but those classic rock hooks that pop up on namely Simian Manifesto and Nasty Hero are catchy as hell. Especially Simian Manifesto, like, again, loads of gallops, loads of harmonies, but it actually kind of breaks more into thrash metal on that one. Like, there's a really nice, fast, aggressive section on it. And Nasty Hero just has this flat out like 80s rock sort of hook to it. Like, it is such a catchy melody. I love the bridge on it. They have a lot of fun with the leads and the melodies and good song building on there. I really dug this one, but I think this one is just a bit better. It's a little bit more strange. I mean, this is back when they were called the Lord Weird. Not as though this one wasn't weird, because it's about fucking apes uprising and shit. First off, I have to say this album cover is absolutely amazing. I love all the tentacles and hands and everything that goes into this, I don't know, golem of fleshiness or whatever the hell it is. I don't know, it's amazing. But pretty much everything they did on this one, I think they did kind of just a bit better on here. The songs are a little bit tighter, and I think there's like a little bit more 70s prog that kind of comes out, like, I don't know, like little bits of maybe Rush or Uriah Heep. And I think this one maybe does like the storytelling aspect in terms of the lyrics a little bit better. Like there's just a more cohesive flow to this, especially I would say the songs, let's see, Heavy Metal Monk, Fergus May Roic, and Cauldron of Blood. They almost kind of flow as one song. They are individual tracks, and that's not just like one giant piece with multiple movements, but it kind of feels that way just in terms of how the songs sort of play off of one another. And in terms of just flat out ridiculous fun, the song Troll Pack is almost like a heavy metal Primus song. It's a little bit kind of goofy and weird, and I do think there's a really cool bass line to it. And there's even a chew your flesh, gnaw your bones chant to it, which sounds very trollish. It kind of reminded me of the old Rankin Bass Hobbit movie, except, you know, with the goblin singing Down, Down to Goblin Town. It's odd I find myself singing that way too often because that movie was a huge part of my childhood. But yeah, kind of that vibe. But yeah, both of these were fantastic listens. This is just fun heavy metal that is a little bit inventive, a little bit more quirky, and while it definitely embodies all the tropes of classic heavy metal, there's just something, well, a little weird about it, and I think that makes it even more listenable. So I'm definitely on the hunt for more stuff from Slough Feg. If you have not jammed this band, I strongly recommend it if you're a fan, again, of like Uriah Heep, Iron Maiden, like Angel Witch, Diamond Head, Rush, all sorts of stuff like that. Check this band out. They're fucking awesome. Alright, as warned, this next batch of 5 albums is by the same band because I just decided to fucking go for it and get their stuff because they've been a huge part of my listening since I was a kid, and that band is Talking Heads. So we're going to start off with their 1977 LP. Take a guess when this one came out. Anyway, I hold David Byrne in high esteem in terms of just his inventiveness, his creativity, and just this band in general being very much pioneers of the whole new wave sound. Now, this was their first album. They were based out of Rhode Island when they were around. I've had a greatest hits for this band for years, and I decided, well, this band warrants more than just a greatest hits because, yeah, almost all of their work, I think, is just hyper influential and very strange. And starts right away with this album because this is almost a weird kind of disco album, like a lot of danceable beats. They hadn't gone like full bore into like that 80s new wave sound. Like this is definitely proto new wave, and I would say more so than anything it is more based on disco, but it's again a little strange, a little weird. Like you have David Byrne's vocals, which are and he's a strange dude, but the secret weapon and the thing that I think really drives the band is Tina Weymouth's bass lines. Her bass lines are absolutely fantastic. They're funky, they have clever accents to it, and they add just these great quirky melodies to every song. Now, while I would say like a good chunk of this is very much like dance music, they were willing to kind of get outside of the box and experiment with different sounds, like some synthesizers here and there, like the opening track, Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town. We have some steel drums that kind of add like an extra percussive, you know, bit of fun to it. The guitar interplay is very strange, lots of stylistic shifts here and there, but again, still very much rooted in like disco music, especially The Book I Read or The Book I Read. I can't remember what he actually says in that. Either way, heavy on the disco rhythms and that guitar interplay, sort of like a weird back and forth between these almost kind of like looped riffs. It just kind of adds like this weird sort of disjointed fun. But I mean, of course, the main single on this one, the one that actually kind of broke them out a little bit, was Psycho Killer, which is just an odd, quirky song, but man, is it catchy. And it's a little bit different than a lot of the stuff on here where it's not like the most straightforward dance rhythm. A lot of this I would just describe as like silly, but oddly catchy, especially like First Week, Last Week, Carefree, Don't Worry About the Government, and the last track, Pulled Up. they're just kind of quirky and odd, and you can't help but to like really get into them just because of how strange they are. Like that was kind of the Talking Heads' appeal kind of throughout their career. They were just this odd band that really didn't fit in anywhere, namely because they were kind of pioneering a bit of a different sound. But that was their charm, that was their appeal. Like they just were kind of strange. And that would continue on throughout the rest of their career, and we're gonna get into more of it. But yeah, solid debut, fun, weird. I'm probably gonna say that a lot about most of these albums. But anyway, we're gonna get on to the next one here, which is their second album, More Songs About Buildings and Food. The origins of that album title are debated, I guess. There was an artist that said that they just said that in passing and kind of gave that title to the Talking Heads. I think Tina's story was they had no idea what to call this next album, and I think David Byrne just sort of blurted that out and was like, okay, fine, that. Either way, it's just a very strange album title to go with a very strange album. Now, this is a slight transition in terms of their sound. This was the start of their working relationship with one Brian Eno, who is, I mean, like, I don't know, it's hard to describe him. Like, he's a musician, but he doesn't necessarily consider himself a musician. I guess you could even consider himself more of a sound manipulator. He'd like to contribute more to atmosphere with, like, less traditional instruments and synthesizers and just soundscapes and samples. And he did a lot on here in terms of like making their sound even more strange, but also way more interesting because he thought outside the box, and this band was kind of already well outside the box in terms of music. So this was kind of an interesting era for this band. And it was definitely noticeable, especially like the opening track, Thank You for Sending Me an Angel, is notably more poppy and more lush. There's more synths to it, and the production is notably bigger overall. But you still have like their very quirky kind of like, you know, new wave disco sound. Like, let's see, The Girls Want to Be with the Girls, Found a Job, Artists Only. Like they have all the fun, you know, like disco sorts of beats, Tina's bass lines, David's strange vocal patterns and odd lyrics. The Good Thing has probably one of my favorite bass lines and a very odd vocal harmony that just seems to work somehow. Like it's just strange, but again, infectious. And that was kind of like the whole thing on this album, where they sort of just embraced being strange even more, but they did it in a more grand fashion, and arguably did it a bit better just in terms of like creating very unique hooks on here. The Big Country embraces like a little bit of like country and bluegrass with some slide guitars. Warning Sign is a big standout with the more drum and bass groove, and it builds up really well into like kind of a big rocker of a song on here. This album is an improvement over the first one, and you can just really kind of hear them coming into their own and just, again, being wildly inventive, and then, you know, of course, being paired up with Brian Eno for a run of albums. They kind of just, you know, threw the rule book out and just like, you know what, let's just kind of do our own thing, write some strange songs, see if they take off. And yeah, this album is a great example of it. So yeah, awesome sophomore album, possibly better than the first one. I don't know, I like them both, but yeah, we're gonna move on to the next one. Their third album, Fear of Music. And this one's a little bit different. Actually, I would say this is probably their darkest album, or at least most serious, just in terms of the themes and the subject matter. I guess lyrically, David Byrne was talking more about individuals and just sort of navigating the city, because I believe they moved to New York City at this point. And some of the atmosphere feels just a little bit more, I don't know, just dark sounding, especially on Life During Wartime and Memories Can't Wait. Like those are two huge standouts. They kind of strip back a lot of the more disco kind of lightheartedness in favor of, I would say, just something a little bit more, I don't know, like maybe somber or reflective. And honestly, I think it's a standout for that reason. It kind of just has this own sort of unique vibe to it. It still has like its dancier numbers, like namely Paper and City, but I think this one, like Brian Eno really felt more involved in terms of the overall sound of the album, because it feels more layered. There's way more like soundscapes going on, and again, there's a little bit more variety in the songs. Like they're not all sort of like, again, like a little bit more lighthearted and sort of fun. Like they are, you know, again, a little bit more serious. The song Heaven is almost like new wave meets alt country. You have like some really interesting sort of like funky rhythms on electric guitar. And the song Animals is, I wouldn't say like heavy, but it feels a little bit more aggressive. Like there's some more shouted vocals on there, almost kind of similar to like hardcore like gang vocals. It definitely feels like a little bit of punk influence has kind of crept onto that one, at least on that track. But yeah, this album is honestly one of my favorites of the batch I got, just because it definitely stands out from the pack. You know, both musically, it gets a little bit more adventurous, I think, and again, tonally being a little bit more dark. I mean, it still has its fun, silly moments because it's Talking Heads, but I really dug this one. This one is quite a gem in their discography, and honestly, it took me a little while to realize that I have heard Memories Can't Wait before, because Living Color actually covered it on Vivid and did a really good job. But yeah, fantastic album. The fourth album was the one that was missing in terms of the ones I was picking up, and that is Remain in Light, which is one of the big ones. I mean, Once in a Lifetime is probably one of my favorite songs by Talking Heads, and I had to wait till I got back to pick that one up. So we're going to go from the third one all the way to the fifth one, Speaking in Tongues, which honestly, this is one that kind of like really broke them big. Now, Remain in Light was the last one they did with Brian Eno. They pretty much kind of severed that relationship and went on to sort of do everything themselves. Like, I believe this was actually produced by the band, and tonally, it's very different than, I would say, the last two. Like, Remain in Light definitely had a more serious vibe to it, especially when you strip back the lyrics. This one, they kind of just got silly and fun again, and it really kind of worked to their advantage because it spawned one of their biggest hits, Burning Down the House, the opening track. Absolutely amazing song. But this album is notably more upbeat, more danceable, more fun, loose. And honestly, I think that's where like Tina's bass lines really fit. Like, she just knows how to pepper in those cool melodies behind these like fun, bouncy rhythms. And this album is just sort of a fun, light-hearted jaunt. Sounds like Making Flippy Floppy, Girlfriend is Better, I Get Wild, Wild Gravity. Like, they're just fun, infectious, sort of just dance songs with silly lyrics. I mean, Flippy Floppy is definitely a song about sex, like it has to be. I'm reasonably sure it is. The drums have taken on more of that 80s sound, like they're a little bit more washy, they're less, you know, like kind of analog sounding. Like, they don't sound as natural, but they sound very fitting for the 80s, especially for what they were going for. And the atmosphere, without Brian Eno doing the more lush soundscapes, it's a little bit more stripped back. There's like a little bit more looping of noises and, you know, kind of odd synths. It kind of feels as like weird and fun as the first album was, but at the same time, like, there's just great melodies and great hooks in here, and it's just a flat-out fun album to listen to. The guitars are a little bit more funky. There are gospel choirs on Slippery People and Swamp, which are interesting because they play off of the strange muttering vocals that David Byrne is doing on that one. This album is honestly some of their catchiest songs, and again, it's them more lighthearted, and it's just a fun listen. Kind of the party album, I would say, out of almost all of them. So yeah, this is a giant standout in my opinion, but their sixth album right here, Beautiful Creatures, is probably one of the biggest standouts in their entire discography because they kind of just strip back all the danceable disco stuff, and this is kind of their Americana album. Like, it's, you know, a little bit more folky, there's some country elements. It still has like that new wave sound in terms of like the interesting samples and like keyboards and such, but a lot of this was more centered around like catchy vocal patterns, especially in terms of like, you know, vocal harmonies. Like, I think this one has some of their strongest vocal harmonies across the board. But there's more of a rock feel to a good chunk of these songs, especially like an opening track, And She Was, which was a big single. Road to Nowhere has that cool marching beat, and it's just, you know, kind of like an odd folk song with rock elements. There's accordions in there. The vocal harmonies are catchier than hell. I remember, I think, hearing that song for the first time in the end credits of Little Monsters, one with Howie Mandel and Fred Savage. It's a strange movie. I mean, the 80s were loaded with strange movies, but strange movies were kind of a perfect place to put a Talking Heads song. But when it came down to like their earlier sound, they kind of just stripped it back or almost entirely abandoned it in terms of like again, that new wave sound. Like again, this was just sort of a strange listen. Like The Lady Don't Mind and Give Me Back My Name have really cool like slide guitar parts, which weren't necessarily very prominent at all before. And the steel guitar that's on Creatures of Love, which again kind of gives it like a sort of weird kind of country-ish vibe, but you know, a little too strange for most modern country. I don't know, there's just something interesting about these songs being a little bit more like stripped back in one sense, but way more like adventurous in another. The only songs here that really remind me a lot of their earlier material are Walk It Down and Television Man. Television Man in particular, I think that's just a fantastic, like, kind of weird song. I love the bongos are on it. It's a little bit longer than the other tracks. It kind of, you know, just has some fucking fun with it. Like, it has like a little bit of the earlier album's sort of quirkiness. But yeah, I really dig this album. It's very strange and quirky in its own way, and in kind of comparison, the other ones, again, very different. And then their last album would be even more stripped back. But yeah, I would say this is kind of a watershed mark for the band. I think this is their highest selling album to date. And yeah, it's kind of the one where, you know, I think it kind of divided the band in terms of like the direction of the sound. And I believe this is where the other members were kind of distancing themselves from David Byrne because they thought he took more control of the band, which, yeah, he might have. But either way, fantastic album. And yeah, just check out Talking Heads. I think they're just a really strange, awesome band, and fiercely not metal, but fiercely fucking fun. Thought Industry, Songs for Insects. This is the debut album from this Kalamazoo, Michigan-based progressive thrash metal act. I don't know, it's proggy, I would say almost kind of avant-garde, and for coming out in 1992, man, this has a lot of tropes of bands like Protest the Hero and Voivod and like Coheed and Cambria, BT Bam. This band loves to genre hop and fiercely strange and all over the place, vocally dynamic as hell. This was a really weird listen, but a lot of fun. Now this band would change around their sound in their later albums, shifting to more I guess you could say alternative metal, alternative rock, but this first album is packed with thrash riffs and like just fiercely heavy sections, and then going completely off the rails and doing God, man, like rockabilly occasionally and just strange prog. Well, the riffs remind me a lot of Voivod, just in terms of being like a little bit more distant and a little bit more strange. Vocally, I would say this is more on par with like Faith No More or like Anthrax, like definitely Joey Belladonna. And oddly enough, another kind of strange metal band that I picked up a bunch of stuff from last time I was in Florida, Galactic Cowboys. But yeah, this is just genre hopping all over the place and very strange. Like Daughter Mobius just keeps jumping around. It's kind of hard to get a hold of. Honestly, that song's just flat out nuts. Cornerstone has almost an industrial vibe, like almost similar to Ministry. But yeah, it's just strange and all over the place. Again, like Daughter Mobius was the one that really kind of caught me off guard, because like earlier on, like, all right, they kind of settle in some good thrash gallops here and there. Daughter Mobius starts off with bluegrass, and then it gets into like, you know, flat out punk, and then it just shifts into metal chugs. And the guitars in here are really heavy, and that is because this band used 7-string guitars all the way back in '92, and generally that wasn't like popularized until much later with like Fear Factory and Meshuggah and Korn. Everything about this album is just quirky and weird and strange, but one of the things that I took away from this is that every member is a multi-instrumentalist. They all play multiple things, and there's just so many different ideas on here coming together, sometimes better than others. But the ultimate vibe in this is just a fun album that does not play by the rules. Like, there's definitely a Mr. Bungle sort of vibe to it, just in terms of like, fuck it, let's just try it and see if it works. There's even some neoclassical elements with fucking pianos on here. It's very theatrical, it's very dramatic. Again, with the stylistic shifts and all that. It's just a really strange album, and again, with all the interesting things they were doing kind of ahead of the curve for bands like, you know, BT Bam. I think BT Bam is very comparable. It makes this just a very interesting listen overall. So if you've never checked out this band, granted their later stuff is a lot different from what I gather, check this one out. This one in particular is just an absolutely nuts album loaded with just absolutely insane songs that sometimes don't make any sense, but they kind of do. I don't know. I really dug it. It's just weird. And yeah, check it out. Trauma, As the World Dies. This is the third album from this San Francisco thrash/speed metal act. Bit of interesting history with this band. They're more known for the fact that this was the band that Cliff Burton played in before he joined Metallica. They didn't put out an actual album with him, but they did put out one in 1984 called Scratch and Scream. They broke up a year later and then resurfaced in 2013, put out an album that I hadn't heard, and then put out this one, which actually features Greg Christian, formerly of Testament, on bass. And this is legit the first time I've heard any of their music, and this is some pretty decent, straightforward speed metal / thrash metal. It's got solid riffs, really great guitar tone on here. Like, I really love it. It's just punchy and crunchy and just kind of everything I like about thrash metal. Lots of solid riffs, especially on From Here to Hell and the absolutely ripping Run for Cover. I really do dig that track a lot. The vocals are more in the speed metal range, where they were going for more of a singer, and vocals are kind of hit or miss. Like, you know, bass line, it kind of reminds me of like Flotsam and Jetsam, or maybe like Tim Ripper Owens a bit. The dude has a solid range, but I think it's the note choices sometimes. Like, they don't necessarily always hit, especially when it comes down to like a chorus or a big vocal hook. But for the most part, I was listening to this for the riffs, you know, the fun grooves. And there's a lot of that. There's even some like doomier sections on here with the title track and Last Rites, which that sounds like it should be a doom metal song anyway. A lot of this is just very old school. It's familiar. It sounds like this band really has not changed around their sound much since their formative years. And honestly, I prefer that over trying to sound more modern. The only thing modern about this is the production, which overall the production sounds good. It's not too polished at all. Like, there's still some grit on it. And there's some fun atmosphere, especially on the song Kool-Aid, which actually features a sample of Jim Jones, so well played there. That was pretty damn fun. Overall, it's just sort of a fun throwback listen, really not reinventing the wheel. This is a wheel that has been, you know, rode on for years, and maybe some of the tread might have fallen off, but I mean, it still functions. If you're a fan of, again, like Flotsam Jetsam, I would even say like Forbidden to a degree too, or like even some Iron Maiden and like, you know, more classic heavy metal, check this out. This was a pretty solid release. Troglodyte, Welcome to Boggy Creek. This is the debut album from this Kansas City-based death metal act, and this band loves Sasquatch, like a lot. Like, I mean, it's pretty well illustrated on this album cover, which is fucking fantastic. But yeah, this is just some gnarly old school death metal, bordering on brutal death metal. Like, there's definitely some dying fetus in there, but a lot of like Cannibal Corpse riffing. It's violent, it's fucking savage, it's great music to go ape shit to, haha. Lots of groove, lots of riffs. There's some shorter songs that are a little bit more on the death grind side. Lots of blast beats too, and, you know, vocals that vary from like just solid old school growls to flat out fucking, you know, fucking Sasquatch burps, I guess. And this band knows how to write some like really cool breakdowns and good melodic hooks too, like Caught on Super 8. That's I like the Sasquatch references. Like, if you're gonna have a theme like this, you better have the song titles match up, and yeah, no, they definitely do. But yeah, on Caught on Super 8, there's a really cool like melodic lead-in with like some cool lead guitars and some sick chuggy riffs on that song. And in terms of like chugs, the song Beaten and Eaten, again, great song titles. Absolutely awesome syncopated triplet chugs in there that are just like fucking pummeling as hell. And this band knows how to bring the breakdowns. The breakdowns in here are pretty fucking savage, as well they should be. Especially on Bring Me the Head of Bigfoot, Fossil, and They Walk Among Us. I mean, I gotta read some other song titles in here just because, yeah, they're awesome. Mummified Yeti Hand, Hit by the Hendersons. I appreciate that reference. Again, another fun 80s movie that I loved as a kid. And I do like the little 7-second fuck around that is, the only good hippie is a dead hippie. But yeah, this is just flat out goofy fun. I like self-aware, like dumb humor in death metal, and this is definitely that. And again, this album art is absolutely fantastic, and a bit of a cautionary tale. Always ask for permission to take Sasquatch's picture, because you might rip your fucking face off. Yeah, if you like Cannibal Corpse, Dying Fetus, God, man, a little bit of Jungle Rot in there, Broken Hope. Like, it's just brutal and savage and groovy and riffy and ridiculous fun. I'm definitely going to try to hunt down more by this band just because it's, yeah, this is almost like the equivalent of a Sasquatch sighting in fucking metal. Like, how many Sasquatch-themed fucking metal bands are there? There can't be many. So, of course, I want more, just almost based on that. But, yeah, definitely check this band out. This is just ridiculous fun. Trouble, the Distortion Field. This is the 8th and so far the last album by Trouble. It has been 10 years, so I don't know, it could be the final one even though they are listed as active. This album has at least an interesting story behind it in terms of the lineup changes. They were kind of going through a bit of a rough period in the 90s, and then Eric Wagner left the band for a while. So they got one Kyle Thomas of Exhorder, who I think is an absolutely underrated vocalist, to fill in for those dates. But then Eric Wagner returned from 2000 to 2008, and then he left again. And, well, they decided they still wanted to keep going, so they got Kyle back on, and they wanted him to be their official vocalist. So he rejoined in 2012, and in 2013 they released this, and honestly this one kind of gets overlooked a lot. I think this is kind of a return to form in terms of their overall sound. Kyle's vocal presence on here is absolutely amazing. Not quite like Eric Wagner style, like he's got a little bit lower register. He's not doing the like more Robert Plant vocals that Eric Wagner was kind of known for. He's got more of like a gruff bluesy delivery, but he does have like some good higher register moments on here. And honestly, it's the songs themselves. Like, we're getting back to being doomy and riffy. Like, they kind of, you know, got more into like almost kind of a retro kind of classic rock sort of thing, especially on Plastic Green Head, which I still think is pretty decent, but they were definitely searching for accessibility in terms of the changing musical landscape. And this one, while it's still very hooky, is more rooted in their earlier sound. Like, this brings the doom again, and maybe with it a little bit of the NOLA sludge scene with Kyle on vocals. Most of this album is just packed full of straightforward rockers and great doomy songs too, but also like some more bluesy swagger on songs like The Broken Have Spoken. Ooh, good rhyme scheme there. I Have Told You and Glass of Lies. Like, there's a lot more bluesy licks on there, and that works really well with their sound anyway. Like, this isn't the first time like more bluesy licks have kind of popped up in Trouble's history, but I think with Kyle's vocals, it just comes across as a little bit different, a little bit more, I don't know, sullen and depressive. I think One Life is a big standout for me, only because the doom harmonies on there are just fucking amazing. Like, just such a great melody. But I do like the more aggressive numbers, namely Sucker and Hunters of Doom. Those just bring some hefty punch to the album. And the song The Graying Chill of Autumn kind of sounds a little bit like Alice in Chains. There's some vocal harmonies in there that really sound a lot like Lane Staley, but they really work. And honestly, like, Alice in Chains is not far removed from Doom in terms of, well, their overall sound too. So it works. I really dig this album, and I do think it's kind of overlooked. You know, I mean, I know all the earlier stuff with Eric Wagner is legendary. I fucking own that shit. It's amazing. But this one is just solid songwriting, and it's back to being heavy and doomy. And again, I just feel like it's kind of overlooked in the catalog, mainly because Eric Wagner wasn't a part of it. But if you have never jammed this one, I strongly recommend it. It's just solid doom metal with like a little bit of NOLA sludge sort of worked in. And honestly, I think the songs in here are, for the most part, all fucking great. So yeah, check it out. Warfather, Orchestrating the Apocalypse. This is the debut album from this international death metal act. Featured current and former members of Morbid Angel, Gorgasm, Prostitute Disfigurement, and Vile Existence. Probably the biggest name that is on here is one Steve Tucker of Morbid Angel, but he's not playing bass in here, he's actually playing guitars. Now, this band broke up in 2017, namely because Steve Tucker got involved in a whole bunch of other projects, and around that time, Morbid Angel got back to work. And the only thing that I had picked up by this band was their second album, The Grey Eminence, which I think is absolutely fantastic and super fucking underrated. But the first one I ever heard was this one, because I jammed it on YouTube, and well, I kind of knew I wasn't that huge of a fan, but here I am talking about it because I bought it, because again, they only put out 2 albums. I figured why not get this one too. Again, The Grey Eminence, their second album, is absolutely fantastic. That lineup was retooled a little bit from this one, but this one is straightforward death metal, very much in the lines of Morbid Angel. Like, it's kind of hard not to sound like Morbid Angel with Steve Tucker on vocals. But, well, alright. The songs are a little flat, and the production on here is pretty bad. Very clicky bass drums, hissy cymbals. The guitars, while they have like a good tone, they have almost no weight to them. They're kind of just, I don't know, a little too flimsy for death metal. Like, again, if you compare this one to their second album, the production is notably different and a lot heavier. Something that is at least closely associated with Morbid Angel, I expect to be like sonically very heavy. And again, the guitar tone is good. It's just, there's not a lot of presence behind them. Now, the album is very aggressive. Like, there's tons of blast beats. In fact, I would compare some of this to like that mid-period of Behemoth or like, you know, Chrysian, just in terms of the overall speed and aggression. But I think this album tries too hard to make, you know, extra atmosphere. Like, there's some really good dissonant riffs in here, which I think are fine. Like, those peppered in are good. But this album has 3 interludes on it, and they all feel very unnecessary. And even songs like Gods and Machines, like, they can get cluttered with all that extra atmosphere and synths and such. Like the synths that pop up on My Queen Shall Not Be Mourned, it kind of sounds a little cheesy. Like, it kind of takes away from this sinister edge that I'm pretty sure they were going for, and kind of makes it sound like a goofy Cradle of Filth song. There's a few standout songs on here, but again, like, compared to their second album where I think they pretty much got everything right, this kind of came out of the gate as a bit of a dud. Now, again, I had listened to this on YouTube. I even checked out some reviews just to see if the reviewers were hearing what I heard, and yeah, in fact, the reviews on this were pretty mixed, and I can see why. I would say check out the second album, probably more so than this one. Like, this one was mostly just filling a hole in the collection. It has its moments, for sure, but The Grey Eminence, the second album, is definitely the one to go after. Props on the album cover, though. I do like the album cover. It's very, I don't know, creepy and unsettling, and I don't know, I kind of like the weird machinery and man and whatever that thing is. I feel like it's like a weird AI-generated thing. Like, all right, we want to combine Galactus and the Borg, but also we want to make sure they look like they're close to retirement, and that's what it came up with. But honestly, it's pretty good. But yeah, the album's kind of so-so. Again, if you like Morbid Angel, Chrysian, a little bit of Behemoth, you might dig this one. Again, The Grey Eminence, the second one, that's the one I'm recommending for sure. But yeah, still check this one out, give it a shake. Witchsorrow, No Light, Only Fire. This is the third album from this UK doom metal act. I actually brought up one of their albums, I believe it was God Curse Us, on an underrated doom metal albums fucking forever ago. And I saw this in the used bin, and I was like, man, I really like everything I've picked up by this band so far, so I snagged it. And this might be my favorite thing that I've picked up by the band yet. This is just fucking amazing doom, bordering on stoner doom. Like, there's a little bit of that Electric Wizard sort of sound, but the production is less fuzzy than a lot of Electric Wizards, like, you know, heavy period, like with, you know, like Let Us Pray and, you know, Dope Throne and all that shit. This has more of like a chunky doom tone with like a little bit of fuzz to it. The vocals are haunting, the songs are long and plotting, but you have like some good rockers here and there to kind of bring up the tempo. To the Gallows and the opening track, There Is No Light, There Is Only Fire, are a little bit more like urgent, stomping, like, you know, just kind of in your face and a little bit more chuggy. But man, when you get down to, God, man, Made of the Void, the last track, De Mysterious Doom Sabbathus, love the play on words there. These songs are just slow and murky, lots of big single chugs. The guitar tone and the bass tone together are just this wall of murk and misery, and it's fucking awesome. I absolutely love the start of Disaster Reality too. Like, that just goes back to the old school, like the very Black Sabbath, like the song, like Tritone. It's isolated, it's more ominous, and it builds into this just wall of pure fucking misery, and good doom should do that. I'd say the production here is fucking perfect too. Everything just sounds fucking phenomenal, lots of low end, and surprisingly tuneful too. Like, there's some really good hooks on it. Like, the vocals are a little, yeah, like, you know, they're not doing too much, but they work well with the overall vibe and the overall mood of the album. it's supposed to be, you know, depressive and oppressive at the same time. I think that was the goal there. If it was, mission accomplished. But yeah, it's just a fantastic release, and I would say, like, flat out, if you love Doom, bordering on Stoner Doom, because again, like, it's a little bit fuzzier in some spots, this is just such a badass album. I can't see Stoner Doom fans not liking this, even though I would say it's way more on the Doom side. Yeah, this whole album is absolutely fantastic. I've liked everything I've heard by this band so far. I think I'm missing maybe 1 or 2 albums by them. Either way, I'm gonna hunt them down, and yeah, if you, again, like, Electric Wizard, maybe Saviors a little bit, Mono Lord, yeah, throw that in there too. Definitely check this out. Absolutely fucking crushing Doom right here. Wolfheart, Shadow World. This is the second album from this Finnish melodic death metal act. I really enjoyed King of the North. I thought that was a fantastic album, and that was the first one I ever picked up by this band. I've heard pretty much nothing but good things about this band, you know, going into getting some of their stuff, like maybe the last one, and I totally agree. Like, everything I have heard by this band so far has been fantastic. This is the kind of melodic death metal that I like, where the music is definitely melodic, but it's also very aggressive. The vocals stay mostly harsh, like there are some backup vocals that kind of add a little bit of melody behind the growls every now and then, but it is harsh and biting. It is guitar driven as hell. The tone on here is thick and chunky, lots of blast beats, lots of aggression, but it's also very epic and hooky. Like, this is how to do melodic death metal, in my opinion. It has all the extra accoutrements, like, well, we have classical pianos, especially in the opening track, Aeon of Cold, and Nemesis, which that song is just a flat-out banger. There's giant epic harmonies and lush synths, but the synths sit back in the mix a little bit, so they're not overpowering the songs, so they keep them nice and riff-driven. And again, lots of just catchy melodies everywhere, but it stays aggressive and biting. Like, there's a lot of blast beats on here, too, which, you know, a lot of melodeath seems to kind of go more for the groove. Now, the main guy behind this is also the main guy behind Before the Dawn, which broke up in favor of him continuing on this, but they recently resurfaced with a new album that I reviewed, and I didn't care for very much. And honestly, kind of reminded me why Wolfheart became, you know, more of his main thing, because it's just kind of better. It's just more dynamic overall. Like, I think the songs are more interesting just in terms of the, you know, paths they take. Like, the last track, Very, is notably more somber, almost kind of sounds like Paradise Lost a little bit. I do think the outro of it is a little long-winded in terms of the pianos and synths. Granted, they are very pretty. It just kind of, I don't know, takes a little too long to get over with. But overall, this album is fantastic. I like that it's very heavy, very just, you know, in your face, but it's also, you know, very melodic, very tuneful, very catchy. It's absolutely awesome. So needless to say, I'm definitely going to be getting some more Wolfheart in the future. This is, I think, how melodic death metal should be done. At least in my opinion, I think the melody should be like more integrated into the music more so than the vocals. This kind of avoids all the trappings of like poppier choruses and such. This is just super well done. If you are a big fan of like Hypocrisy and like, you know, the early Gothenburg stuff too, definitely check this out. This is fucking fantastic. Withered Earth, Of Which They Bleed. This is the third and final album from this New York-based death metal act. I actually had some of their stuff on some old Olympic Records samplers, and I saw this and was like, you know, let's just pick this up. And this was pretty good. It's very brutal in your face, definitely has like a little bit of that thrashy death metal sound, like Malevolent Creation and Deicide in spots. The songs are in your face, they really don't waste any time, kind of just getting to the very brutal point. Lots of groove and lots of like nasty riffs. The production is pretty raw in here. I do think the guitar tone is kind of dirty sounding. Like, it's not necessarily like the best dirty sounding. I think it's just a little too overpowering, a little too murky at times. And I think it's a little uneven too, like just in terms of like going from song to song. Sometimes a certain song will sound like a little bit better or worse in terms of the mix overall. But a lot of it has to do with the guitars and the vocals being very out front, and they kind of drown out the drums occasionally. But musically, like, this is just some no frills like death metal. Like, it's very rooted in like 90s death metal. I would say more Floridian than the New York death metal side, because there really isn't a lot of like like that sort of New York style brutality to it, like Suffocation or Baphomet or anything. Like, this is still more rooted in like Deicide and Malevolent Creation, Monstrosity, stuff like that. There are some almost like Death Doomy moments on Under the Merciless and Worlds Without End, but the majority of the stuff that I liked was the more groove-laden stuff, especially Calculated to Create Terror. That's the song that was on the sampler that I heard, and I was like, yeah, that's just pretty fucking badass. Now, I know their other two albums, I believe, get a little bit more love. This one, you know, not really the ugly stepchild out of the bunch, but I don't think it's as good as the other ones, at least as far as what I've heard. But I do want to check those out, eventually get those, because I thought this was pretty solid. Nothing mind-blowing, nothing reinventing the wheel, but it's just well done death metal, you know, very 90s style, even though it came out in 2003. It's riff-driven, it's brutal, it's thrashy, got some catchier moments on it. I mean, again, if you like any of the bands that I brought up, you'll probably dig this, so yeah, check it out. Zentrix, Scourge. This is the fourth album by this UK thrash metal act. Maybe not so thrash metal on this one. This was the only one that I was missing, and this is their big groove metal album, and I don't like it. Like, this is easily the worst of their releases, but me being a completionist, here I am with it in my hand talking about it. So yeah, this was a big misstep. Honestly, I wasn't the biggest fan of Kin. Like, the first two Zentrix albums are absolutely fantastic, and honestly the last two Zentrix albums are really good. Since they've reformed, they've put out some quality thrash metal. But it's that mid-period that gets a little bit dicey, where Kin still kind of had a nice balance in terms of thrash metal and being a little bit more groovy and maybe a little bit more elaborate in the songwriting. This one is just basic, run-of-the-mill groove metal with just boring riffs and syncopation and dull songwriting, and they even found a different singer on here. Their frontman had left the band. He was also their rhythm guitarist, or he might have been rhythm and lead. Either way, he left. They had to get another second guitarist, and then their new singer, he pretty much just sounds like a Rob Flynn clone. Like, they were going hard for, God, I would say the first two Machine Head albums, but man, did they miss the mark. While the dude can sing, it's just so on the nose in terms of like every trope of 90s groove metal. And again, the songwriting is dull, and this album is 52 minutes long. Like, it is a long, dull ride. This is the musical equivalent of like driving through the most barren part of Nebraska for a solid hour. There's nothing to see, nothing to hear, just nothing but, again, the same stuff that feels recycled throughout this entire album. There's even some like really cringy rapped vocals on the title track and Caught You Living. That's even kind of a dumb song title. You have some industrial noises that pop up on Incites and The Hand That Feeds Itself. That's also stupid. And Blood Nation. They really don't contribute much other than like, hey, there's a noise in there now. I know, right? Never heard that in groove metal before. I mean, speaking of stuff that you've totally never heard in groove metal, Call You Living is flat out dick riding Pantera. Down to the vocals. Like, the vocals kind of go for like the earlier fill vocals, like namely on Cowboys from Hell. It's not really terrible, but it's also done much better on Cowboys from Hell, which pretty much this entire album, I would say, is just them trying to be relevant in a changing landscape and really failing miserably. So miserably, in fact, that this was the last release for a number of years until they came back with, you know, their last two albums, which have been really fucking good. This is definitely not the most necessary release from this band. In fact, I would just say skip it altogether, because this was just a dull affair. But I'm sure this might be someone's favorite Zentrix album. I don't know. It could be possible. It's not mine. But I still urge you to check it out, form your own opinions. If you liked Demolition Hammer's Time Bomb, which, as far as I know, not really many people do, you might really dig this. But outside of that, yeah, it's groove metal. It's really American sounding groove metal too. So yeah, check it out. But you've been warned. All right, we have a pair here from Yes. We have their third album, the Yes album, and we have their fifth album, Close to the Edge. Both of these are pretty much classics, and this is my mom's influence on me coming out, more so my collecting habits, because my mom used to play Yes a lot for me. I would say this is one of the most played bands that I knew she had like CDs and tapes for when I was younger, and I would hear the stuff all the time, and it was hard not to get latched onto it because Yes are just one of the best fucking prog bands ever. Both these albums are excellent. I will come right out of the gate saying that this is like a lot of the more classic sounding stuff. Now, the Yes album was the first appearance of Steve Howe in the Yes lineup, and for a while the last appearance of Tony Kaye on keyboards. And this album is absolutely fantastic. I've heard this one numerous times. I mean, Starship Trooper is such an amazing song. Every single section of it. I've seen All Good People. I mean, that's honestly one of their big hits, but man, Yours Is No Disgrace is honestly one of my favorite songs by them. I love the songwriting. Tony Kaye's keys are amazing on there too. Like, I'm a bigger fan of Rick Wakeman just because he just knows how to be spacey and weird, and he wore a cape all the time playing keyboards, which is like the most prog thing for a fucking prog keyboardist to do. But honestly, it's the rhythm section, man. Bill Bruford and Chris Squire, like, man, dude, like one of the best rhythm sections in prog rock ever, I think. I believe this album in particular was a big influence on Geddy Lee in terms of bass playing. It's hard not to pick up a lot of Geddy's, playing style in here just because he was so influenced by Chris Squire. I believe this was the first one when they started including a little bit more like country and folk on here, like the song Clap, which is kind of just an interlude. It sounds like they're playing live at a festival. It might be. And Perpetual Change, the last track, has a little bit more of a country flair to it, but with Steve Howe's guitar playing ability, like, it's definitely a little bit more intricate and just flamboyant. But I love how that song transitions to like more of a jazzy, swingy groove on there. Like, this band was just really, pushing themselves creatively on this one, especially. Like, the first two, I haven't really jammed much of the first two Yes albums, but this is kind of where I jumped on because this was one my mom played a lot. As was Close to the Edge because, this is often regarded as one of their best. This is the last one with Bill Bruford on drums. I guess the whole recording process of this was just very daunting for him, and he wanted out of the band after that, which is weird because he joined King Crimson because that music's totally not daunting at all. But I went over them earlier in a collection update, and Red's absolutely insane. And admittedly, I think Yes is just a little bit more listenable overall than King Crimson. King Crimson's very strange and avant-garde. This is still rooted in a lot of just killer melodies and hooks, really great vocal harmonies all over the place, and like all these songs on here rule. My favorite probably being Siberian Katru, something like that. I love that song. I think every single moment of that song is just some of the best songwriting in prog rock ever. The shifts are fucking seamless in it. The bass work is incredible. John Anderson's vocals are fucking awesome on there. And I love how the song flows. Like, it's got some great fucking grooves and just memorable hooks. Both of these albums are absolutely fantastic, namely because it's classic Yes, and classic Yes, I would say, is some of the best prog rock you can find still. Now, both of these are special editions, and they do have some extra tracks on them. Like, this one has more single versions of stuff off of Starship Trooper, namely Lifeseeker, and the Your Move section of I've Seen All Good People, and a different studio version of Clap. This one also has the single versions on there too, which are good in case you don't want to listen to the entire like 18-minute or 16-minute songs. I mean, you should because all of it's good, but I totally understand. But the thing that I really liked on this one was the studio take of Siberian Katru, which I think is awesome. They just kind of jam it out, and it's a nice, more raw version of it. Both of these are excellent. Both of these I strongly recommend if you are a big prog head. There's a good chance you probably already have them. But if for some reason you've skipped over classic Yes, go get some Yes. And believe me, I'm going to be bringing them up again because I got some in Denver too. So patching up holes in all sorts of discographies in these trips. But check out some Yes. These two are fucking fantastic. And that's pretty much all I need to say there. ZZ Top, Tejas. This is their 5th album, came out in 1976. ZZ Top, one of the best 3 pieces ever. Straight up Texas blues. At this point, they were kind of transitioning a little bit more, like just in terms of production and sound, like it was a little bit less organic than, say, like the earlier stuff like Tres Hombres and Rio Grande Mud. But when it came down to the hooks, they still had them, of course, because it's ZZ Top. But the slightly more modern sound in here did not take away from just what they do well, which is just fantastic blues rock. I think this is one of like Billy Gibbons' best albums in terms of his vocals. He's got that perfect mix of gruff and tuneful on here, and probably my big stand on here is El Diablo, which is like a creepy, haunting song, kind of like a long drive in the desert at night kind of vibe. I love the sliding guitars and creepy melodies on there. I also like the Drury ballad at the end, Asleep in the Desert, which has some absolutely beautiful acoustic guitar work. But a lot of these are just like good rockers, like just fun and fucking just riffy, like $10 Man and Pan Am Highway Blues. Those are just fantastic songs. A lot of these songs are a little bit shorter, like they kind of just get to the fucking main riff, get to the chorus, kind of take the bass line for a walk. I know I fucking say that a lot, but you know, it's fucking Ron Burgundy's fault. But yeah, these songs are just fun, catchy, hooky. They capture the whole Texas atmosphere. It feels like you should hear buzzards and shit in the background. And they just know how to write like solid blues rock songs. Like that is what ZZ Top does. Like this is definitely pre-Eliminator before they really discovered, hey, drum machines are kind of fun and can make this recording process a little bit easier. But man, let's get a little bit heavier and I don't know, let's stop shaving. Well, of course, you know, except for the drummer whose literal last name is Beard. I always thought that was fucking odd. But I mean, watching the documentary, he knew he couldn't keep up with Dusty and Billy's beard growing prowess. It was like, nah, it just didn't look as cool as theirs. And yeah, let them have it. But yeah, this is just another killer album from ZZ Top. Kind of an underrated one, kind of gets overlooked because kind of sits between, you know, some albums that had some bigger hits on it. Like, I believe the one after this is Deguelo, or however you say that. It's the one with Cheap Sunglasses on it. That's a fucking great album. But yeah, this is fantastic as well. So if you didn't check this one out for some odd reason, I know ZZ Top has a lot of albums. Check this one out. It's got some damn good songs on it. Alright, decided to pick up an old school comp since I used to love getting comps way back. So this is Welcome to Meteor City, which they advertise it is Desert Rock, Sludge, and Cosmic Doom. Now this was a label that popped up in the late 90s. In fact, I think this is their first release because the catalog number on here is MCY001. So this might have been their first little thing they put out to sample all the bands they put out, and pretty much just went after like Caius worship bands, which should be pretty obvious if you look at the album cover. I mean, it's definitely a reference to Caius's Welcome to Sky Valley, which is fucking amazing. That is pretty much like the baseline of what they were trying to sign. In fact, I believe the main gentleman that was in charge of this label was also the frontman of the band Spiritu, which was 100% some Caius sort of worship with a little bit of doom to it. I absolutely love their lone full length. But yeah, I used to go after bands just because they were on this label because I instantly knew what they were going to sound like. And this pack's got, what, let's see, 17 tracks in here. It's over 77 minutes long. And granted, there are a lot of bands I definitely know in here, like the Atomic Bitchwax, 60 Watt Shaman, Goat Snake, which they have Mower on there from their first album, which I still need to get a copy of their first album. It's so fucking good. Road Saw, which I've brought up before, Celestial Season, which is more of a straight up doom metal act, and Dozer, which I think actually has John Garcia from Caius running it. There's a lot of stuff in here I had not heard before. Now, I've picked up their samplers in the past, and they're always good. I always find some interesting stuff on there, but it was just kind of cool seeing this one in the used bin. I was like, oh yeah, this is like, you know, kind of like home. Like this is when I got into like Caius and Fu Manchu. I was going after all sorts of cool stoner rock, stoner metal shit, and yeah, it was just fun finding this sampler. I'm not going to go into like every track in here because again there are 17 of them. But yeah, if you see one of these samplers lying around and it's reasonably cheap, I would go ahead and snag it because I mean if you're a stoner metal fan and just like trippy, you know, psychedelic rock and sludge and doom metal, it's going to have probably all of those things on it. So yeah, definitely check this out if you get a chance. I might link a couple of the bands in terms of the description, because I don't know if I can find the entire comp on YouTube in terms of a link to it. But I'll see if I can find something just to give you an idea of what all you're going to find in it. But yeah, good stuff. Diatribe, Rabid Nightmare. This is the second album from this one-man French death metal act. I mean, it's death metal on this one, but I guess he was doing one-man black metal before this. Now, this is one I actually got in the Metalhead box, and it arrived not too long after I got back from Florida, so I'm just throwing it in with the Florida stuff. But I have never heard the black metal side to this one-man project, but I can say that the death metal side is ridiculously heavy. Now, I think all the drums are a drum machine, though he is listed as playing drums. They might be programmed, but they're definitely very loud, very punishing. This is very groove-laden, heavy, kind of similar to Fulci in a lot of ways. Like, it's not quite as, like, flat-out old-school brutal death metal as they are. Like, there's definitely some more, like, atmospheric elements. In fact, there's a really long interlude on here. I think it's Behold the Sin, which is just, like, gothic chants and, you know, like, just gothic dreary atmosphere, but it goes on too long. But it's definitely along the lines of Fulci, though. Like, heavy, punishing, elements of brutal death metal. There's occasionally some death grind on here as well. I really got Fulci's vibe kind of specifically on the song Blowned by Fear. Blowned. B-L-O-W-N-E-D by Fear. Blowned. That's ultra mega past tense of blown? Blow? Fuck, I don't know. That's really confusing. And maybe sexual? I don't know. That song title is very, very confusing. Anyway, very heavy, very chuggy, just kind of groove-laden beat down. You do get some more blasty songs like Fluorescent Purgatory. That one has like a little bit of a death grind vibe to it with some really killer melodies at the end of that song. Like, it almost kind of gets a little melodic death metal-ish on that one, but like not fully, like, because it's hard to escape how brutal this album sounds. Like, the production being very drum forward and the guitar tone being so damn heavy, like, it's almost obnoxiously heavy. I did particularly like the songs Forlorn, Trust, and Swamp Abomination. Those definitely lean more on the death grind side, just vicious and fucking heavy. It does pack on one extra bonus track, Pavement of Skulls, which is a bonus demo in here. A little bit more on the raw side, and I'm reasonably sure that it's a drum machine on there, and it's a little bit less in the mix this time, but it is a demo, so it is, you know, way more raw. But overall, this was pretty good. I do think the songs kind of run together, like they all kind of have a similar mode, but that similar mode is still pretty fun. I would like to check out the black metal side of this, because this is totally just death metal. Like, there's not a blackened moment on here at all. So I'm kind of curious about that one. But yeah, not too bad. Pretty cool underground, kind of filthy death metal release. And yeah, I recommend checking it out if you're a big fan of, again, Fulci, and I would even say like Mortician to a degree. But yeah, nasty stuff. And finally, we have Hulder, Benighted in Blood. Now, this is a Metalhead box exclusive, released through that company, and this is a live performance that was in, I believe, the Metro in Baltimore in 2022, and it's really fucking good. I became a fan of this band on God's Last Ring, Forlorn something or other. It's got a long fucking title, but I really enjoy that album. Folky, kind of medieval black metal, but it is packed full of riffs. Lots of just killer epic swings, lots of melody. I really dig that album. I think it's absolutely incredible, and a good chunk of this live performance is stuff from that album. In fact, the first three tracks are the first three tracks on that album, and man, this is a killer live performance. Now in the studio, this is a one-woman project, but of course she had to get a live band together, and she got some top-tier players. She got Charlie Corrin on drums from Ascended Dead, Void Ceremony, and a litany of other bands. Casey Lynch from Witch Vomit on guitars, and on bass and backup vocals, she had Sam Osborne from Funebrem. And I mean, that's already a powerful lineup right there. And yeah, the live performance is solid. They mix this thing really well. Like, this has a great sound overall. Almost sounds like a studio recording, but you definitely hear the crowd cheering in the background, which sounds like a small but very energetic crowd. And they're all very into it. There's no live keyboardist listed, and there are keyboards, so I think that was probably just played through the PA. But the songs are absolutely incredible. There's in fact one on here that I had never heard before. I don't have it on any of the demo collections. I think it's Unholy Divine, but I really dig that song. It's notably more dark and sinister, like definitely fierce second wave vibes, which, I mean, second wave vibes are kind of all over her stuff, but that one just feels a little bit more evil, and evil isn't necessarily the big vibe. Like, there's a lot of triumphant melodies, lots of folky melodies, and just great hooks. I'm generally not a big fan of live albums because I'd rather just go see the band live, but this was really cool, and honestly, I kind of want to go see Hulder live. They were supposed to be on that tour with Exhumed a while ago, but I believe she had to drop off for medical reasons, so hopefully she's all right now, and, you know, hopefully getting a tour together of some kind, and, you know, coming around this area, because I would definitely go check this out. But yeah, really solid addition to the Metalhead box. I really do enjoy these Metalhead box exclusive CDs because they've been doing some really cool stuff with that, and you'll be seeing more of that in future collection updates because I got a couple more to talk about. Anyway, solid live album. I generally don't say that very much about live albums because I just generally don't get them, but this was a really cool one to find in the Metalhead box. So yeah, if you get a chance, definitely check this out. All right, that knocks out Florida. We are fucking done talking about that state up until the next time we talk about like a Floridian death metal act or some shit like that. I can officially move on to Denver, which there are a fair amount of newer releases in that, or at least like 2023 releases that I picked up, as well as some classic stuff as well. And after I get some of that knocked out, I can actually start working on like States of Metal stuff and other stuff. I've been trying to like power through these just so I can get them done because there's a lot of other like current releases I'm kind of missing out on, and I'm getting a lot of great recommendations in the comments. It's just almost impossible to keep up with them. But yeah, plenty more coming in the future. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com, which granted is still under construction. When it pops up, our Patreon link will be there. It's also on our channel somewhere too. And hopefully when that pops up, we'll be ever so closer to getting new shirts out. I know I've been teasing that for a while, but it seems to be a longer process than I initially thought. But when we have them, you will know because we'll probably do some goofy video showing them off, and we'll probably do a giveaway for one of those shirts. And speaking of giveaways, not too long after this video airs, there will probably be another video that comes up either the same day or the next day. I don't know which, might be the same day, but I'm going to announce our winner for the 15,000 subscriber giveaway. And yeah, it's again surreal being at that number, but I can't wait to give away all those CDs and a bunch of other stuff to one lucky fan. So stay tuned for that, and of course the heaping amount of thank yous that will be at the end of that video as well, because that's what we do at the end of these videos, because we made it. Thank you guys so much for getting us this far. It means the fucking world to us. I gotta do that really cool panel for the Desert Island death metal albums with a bunch of fucking people I fucking love. Yeah, Mark C with the G, Metalomania, Jason Schultz from Wraith. Yeah, a lot of names that I'm currently forgetting, but it was really fucking awesome. And again, it's just one of the benefits from doing cool shit like this on YouTube. So thank you guys, because you guys make it possible, and we will catch you later.